So I'm going to be going through a demo, and I need to give you some warning. I've worked through half of the demo, so we're going to go commando on part of it. It should be fine because I actually like seeing someone struggle with stuff because it's in the struggle that we learn how these things work. So I'm pretty excited to do that. I'll tell you, I was sitting next to Phil Hack as he was getting ready, and Phil Hack is like the man when it comes to MVC. He's the program manager at Microsoft. He was working on something, a product that he manages, and I saw him struggling, and I said, Phil, it does my heart good to see you doing the same thing that happens to me all the time. So if you see some of that, clap your hands and remember that that happens to you too. All right, today we're going to be doing reporting with WPF and MVVM. I must admit, I haven't used WPF much. I've been playing in the Silverlight arena, but it's about the same with reporting except for a couple of things. I'd be happy to point those out. Again, if there are any questions, please submit them. First thing I'm going to do is I am going to do a poll. I made two. All right, let's see if I can find it. So here is the first one. How long have you been using WPF? Can you see that yet? Oh, let me hit launch. There you go.
Yeah, it's up.
Perfect. So the first thing is WPF something that you're just starting? Are you 1 to 6 months? Are you like yearish? Or do you have a black belt in WPF foo? It's good stuff, huh?
That's good.
Looks like I'm getting about yearish. So some of you will have more experience than me at WPF. If I'm doing something that you think is not the right way to do it, you let me know. We got about 37% on a yearish. We've got 26% on just starting. So you 37%, you let me know if I'm doing something that's not quite right. I'm happy to take suggestions, okay? I am going to be using MVVM, and I'm going to show you how you actually use the view model to bind the preview model on a report. Okay, so we're going to close this one. So the next one is this. How familiar are you with MVVM? The first one is, I know it's a palindrome. For those of you that don't know what a palindrome is, it's the same. What's a palindrome? It's the thing that a word, like race car, you can spell it backwards and forwards. So it looks like we got the majority, looks like we've got played with it. 36% have actually deployed stuff with it. The way I gauge mastery is when you've actually like put something out that people have to use, and so that's how I gauge my mastery. So over 50%, over half of you have played with it. Okay, good. So then in this regard, hopefully I'll be able to help out a little bit. All right. Let's go on to the slides here. Let me show you a little bit about what we're going to be doing today. So let me see if these slides will go. There you go. So the first thing we're going to do is I'm going to go straight to the docs and just load up a report the way it tells us to do it in the docs. I'm going to show you how you
Hey,
can.
Seth.
Yes, ma'am.
Sorry, for me, I can't see your slides.
Oh, so let me hit play. How embarrassing.
It's been a very long week.
Yes. Someone said it was like a week-long camping trip, and on the last day it was like, we haven't slept well, we haven't showered. At least Amanda, you didn't shower for what, 3 weeks beforehand, anyways, and so you feel dirty, and you. Okay, I'm gonna stop there and continue. All right, so I'm gonna do the viewing a report in WPF. I'm gonna literally go to the docs, and we're gonna do exactly what they say. Exactly what the docs say to do. And then I'm going to show you how to move that over to MVVM. I'm going to show you a slide on what MVVM is and why it's a good idea to do this. And then we're going to move it over to MVVM. Then we're going to do some playing around with parameters. And then I'm going to take some questions. Carl Wells was kind enough to send me a question beforehand, and you can always do that. Send me a question beforehand, and I would love to address it. So, again, and I'll also take questions. Okay, so let's hit escape here, and let's close this, and let's go straight to the documentation. So we're going to go to documentation.devexpress.com. All right, let's see. I don't even have Visual Studio started. How embarrassing. So I'll get it started. So the first thing that I always like to do is whenever you have a reporting question, you can go to the documentation, or you can email me. Either way is fine. And what I do is when I want to know how to do something in a particular area, I go to examples, right? And in the examples, they're broken up this way. Well, at least there's one part that's broken up that says, here, if you want to do it in the web, if you want to do it with WPF or Silverlight and so on, notice that I've really hammered the Silverlight stuff. Let's go over to WPF. Here is the document that shows you how to build it. And notice that what it does is it literally is just a button, and they show a window. Now, this is very Windows Form-ish, and we've gotten some complaints that, hey, Seth, your WPF stuff looks like Windows Form. I'll tell you, the majority of our folks come from the Windows Forms era. We wanted to ease the transition over so that if you wanted to get started quickly and you look at this stuff, it would make sense. So the stuff I'm going to show you is going to be very Windows Formy at first, and then we're going to get into this concept of binding and show you how to do that. Okay. So I've blathered enough. Let's start some code here. So here's Visual Studio. I don't have anything started yet, so let's do File, New Project. And we're going to do a WPF application. And we're going to put it in the projects folder. Like so. And we're going to call it the WPF reports. That should be easy enough. And then we'll get it started. Now, one of the things that I always do is when I do my reports, I always put them in their own separate class library. I suggest you do the same. You don't necessarily have to, but I always do that. So I'm going to create a new project. Create a new project, so add a new project. And it's going to be a class library, and it's going to be the reports. All right, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to build a report. So I'm going to right-click here, and I'm going to say add new, oh, not new item. I want to add a database first. So let me hit escape. So we're going to do right-click, and we're going to add an existing item. Now, in everyone's, when you install DevExpress stuff, you will always get this demo folder. For me, it's under Users, Public Documents, DevExpress 2010.2 Demos. And under Components, you can go to Data, and there is this Northwind database, right? And now, the reason why I use the Access database and I bind everything really quickly is because the focus of this particular webinar is WPF. So I want to do the report stuff as fast as possible. All right, so let's hit Next. Let's make a data set out of it. Let's call it Northwind. And let's just pull all the tables. And let's hit Finish. All right. So over here on the right-hand side, we have a database and a data set. It's time to add a report. So we're going to add a new item. And the new item that we're going to be adding is going to be a report. So, by the way, you see this goodness? We are starting to test and look at our 11.1 stuff. So that's why that's there. So let's go to X report and let's change it to a product report. Okay, so notice that it loads all the assemblies that we need. Again, it's in its own assembly, and the reason why I also do this is so that you can see what is required to run the reports in WPF. All right, so here is the report. Let me move this over a little bit. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask you to close your eyes for like 2 seconds because I am literally just going to open a report that I already built. Here it goes. Woo! That was fast. That is the fastest I've ever built a report. Notice that it's just a regular category report. When you do import reports, notice that we do not import data sources, so I will go ahead and fix that. It'll be Northwind. The category is table adapters, what's being used. So I hit preview. Uh-oh, there's a problem. Well, the only problem is that we need to have a table adapter to bring in stuff for each of the products. So let's go over to the designer. Let's go to the detail report, And let's get the proper table adapter for products. Okay, let's hit preview. And there you go. So that's the fastest I've ever built a report. Again, the reason why I've done it this way is because, again, the focus is WPF. All right, so notice that this product is the Northwind products. It's taking the categories table, and it's doing a detail report on the products. So here we have beverages, and here we have a really spiffy chart that compares units in stock with units on order to show you that Chang is really as famous as we thought, right? Notice we have a low stock level and a high units on order. And so Chang is really popular. And then here we have the products, the ordered and the in-stock information in sort of a tabular format. All right, so that's easy. Okay, so now we have a report. Let's go over here. Now we have a report. We have the assembly we need. Let's go ahead down to WPF reports. And let's add a reference. And the reference is going to be to the reports. So we're going to hit add and leave it like that. Okay, so let me get this a little bit bigger and let me close this so we have more space. So what we want to do is we want to just do the button demo where you click it and the thing loads. So let's go over to the toolbox and let's look at some common WPF controls. And I'm going to put a button right here. And the button, I'm going to do the unthinkable. I'm going to click it, and notice that we have this button one clicked. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the code that is exactly in this thing, right? So notice that I really just did what this is saying. I made a report, and in the main window.xaml, right, I added a button. Looks like dropped a button, and we're going to just move this code over. I'm going to explain what it does. The cool thing about it is notice that because I put everything in a separate assembly, the only assembly I've referenced here is the reports. So we're going to need to do some extra stuff, right? So let's go over here. Excuse me. Let's go over here. Remember that we have a product report. So I'm going to say product report using reports equals new product report. Now, this is what's going on. You're looking at these preview models, and let me show you what this does, okay? So the extra report preview model is the thing that contains the report, right? The document preview window is a window that will show the report. Now, in order to get this to work, there's a couple of things that we need to add. And let me show you what those references are. And hopefully, I'll write this down so you guys can see it also somewhere in the docs. The first thing we want to add is DevExpress.data. This assembly contains everything that we do with data. So when you're handling data, DevExpress.data is probably involved. So I'm going to hit add. Notice that it's added over here. You can see it sort of snuck in there. The next thing we want to do is we want to add DevExpress.extra reports, because that has all of the stuff that has to do with reports. So I'm going to hit add. Okay. The next thing we want to do is we want to add system.drawing. And the reason why is because anything having to do with drawing, right, we want to be able to use in reports. So for example, when we spit out a chart, we're drawing stuff, right? Now, the next thing are the things having to do with WPF and Silverlight, or what we like to call XPF, right? Because we've created this this assembly. Oops, I spelled it wrong. This assembly that has core stuff for both Silverlight and WPF, so that you get consistency in the experience between WPF and Silverlight. So let's hit add on that. And the last thing we want to add is XPF.printing. Now, I'll tell you that there is some really cool stuff that I'm going to start to showcase and really show you with printing. It turns out that almost every single one of our controls can automatically be routed over into a report. And we use the printing system to do that. There's things called printing links that allow you to do that, and I'll talk about those things later on. In fact, there was a whole project where I didn't do reporting. I just had a grid because I just wanted tables. And in the grid, I was able to change all the filters and do everything I wanted and automatically show a print preview window for that. So I'll show you how to do that soon. All right, so it looks like we've got everything we need. We've got all the WPF stuff and all of the printing stuff. So once we go here, literally control dot, notice it's saying let's use XPF printing, and everything is good to go. All right, Amanda, any questions before we test this thing and see if it works?
Yeah, we do have one question from Michael. In his project, he's using an ORM. Is there a way to connect the reports to my objects in the domain?
Absolutely. In fact, let me take a little hair of a detour if everyone doesn't mind. And it's going to take a second or so, and let me show you how you would actually do this to objects. So the great thing is that anything that implements iList or iBinding list or iType list or pretty much anything that repeats can be bound. In fact, the only way I ever did reports before is I sent an object graph over to the report itself. Now, if you go up to the little smart tag here and you go to the data source, notice that you can add data sources, right? The one that you need to do in order to do that is an objects, right? So let's just choose objects that can later be used to generate data-bound controls. Now, I don't have any objects in there, but if you were to click that, well, let me click it. What it's going to do is it's going to say, hey, Seth, what object is it that you're going to use to materialize the report? You pick it, it creates a little metadata file, and then you can literally report with confidence on that particular object. Hope that answers your question. Let's make sure I didn't break anything, by the way. Okay, we're still good. Excellent. All right, good. That's an excellent question. That's a question I get very often. It is a scenario we support. It was the only scenario that I used when I actually wrote stuff as a consultant and as a dev. All right, so it looks like we've got everything going. Looks like we've created the product report. We have the extra report preview model, which is the WPF way of previewing stuff. We've created a document preview window, and notice that this window contains something called the model, which is what am I actually rendering out. Excuse me. We create the document, and just a reminder, what does create document do? Let's go over here to the actual documentation, or as I like to call the code documentation. It literally creates a document for the extra report object so the report can be displayed or printed, and it can generate pages in the background. So we'll get out of there, and I'll close that, and let's run it. Let's see what's going on. Oh, I think I hit help. So sorry. I hate when I do that. All right. So let's set a breakpoint here for the button, and let's hit the button. All right, there we are. We've created the new product report. There's the preview model. We're setting the window to that model. We're creating the document, and we're going to hit show. So F5, and sure enough, there is our lovely product report. So right now in the audience there'd be applause. So if you want to clap or something or not, I mean it's up to you. So here's the report. All right, so I'm going to hit X, and now we're going to actually take these concepts that we've talked about and actually bind it, right? So before we do that, I have a slide that I want to show you. All right, so what is MVVM? Here's the picture that I took off the docs at MSDN. I literally went MVVM into Bing or Google and whatever's your favorite, and I loaded up the MSDN docs. So the Model-View-View model, I guess Model-View-Model, I don't know. I don't know why I guess they want a palindrome. The way this actually works is that there is this new class that's sort of interjected into the middle of the model and the view, right? In WinForms, in the click event, we actually, everything we wanted to show in the view, the click event took the data directly from the model. Now, the reason why I like particularly to use a view model is that it separates out your data pieces from how your data pieces are actually going to be shown and how events are handled, right? Because of WPF's really rich binding interface, you can bind anything. You can bind anything. You can bind events, you can bind properties, anything you can bind. And so this object is sort of like this proxy, or this not proxy, I don't want to use that term because it's a particular pattern, but it allows you to bind everything. And because of the way WPF and Silverlight works, these property changed events allow you to have back and forth communication really seamlessly through the binding. So let me erase all my arrows. What it does is anytime the model changes, the view model knows about it. It has property changed events that are sent back to the view, and the read and updates happen between the view model and the view, right? So there's some statefulness that's managed here in the view model and other things, okay? So hopefully this little diagram helps, because we actually are going to literally create a view model class, okay? All right, so let me get out of there. Let me close this down, and let's go about actually creating a view model and getting this thing all to work, okay? Now, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to retract this, and I'm going to create a new class, right? This class is going to be called, well, no, I'm not going to do it there. Let me go over here and create a class for the view model. So we're going to call it the main window view model, right? So there it is. I'm going to move this over to its own file, right? And what we're going to do is we're going to try to move stuff over from the code behind, right, to the view model. Now, the first thing to note is that we have some things, right, that need to get moved over. So I'm going to comment these out, and I'm going to move this commented code over here so that we're reminded of what it is that we're actually doing, okay? So I'm going to move that over here. The next thing we need to do is we need to change the XAML over here, right? Because now what we want to do is we want to embed the report directly into the window rather than using this document preview window, which we're not going to use anymore. So I'm going to take this button and I'm going to take it off. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go down here to the DX 10.2 reporting and drag a document preview on there. Very good. The next thing I'm going to do is I am going to reset the layout so that everything fits like we would like it to. Okay, the other thing is I'm going to make this window just a tad bigger. There we go. Just like so. Okay, now, as you're looking at this, the interesting thing that we need to see is that when we declared stuff over here, notice that there was a preview model that was attached to the document preview model. The document preview model now is literally this thing, right? So let's go over here and let's look at what it is that we need to set up. So let me go to the model. Okay, I know what we need to do. So model, right, is exactly the same thing that we had here. Notice how this document preview took a model. This document preview also is going to take a model. But what we're going to do is, instead of actually declaring it in here, we're going to bind it. So we're going to say binding equals preview model. And we're going to take this out and say preview model. So what this means is that whenever you have a binding, it's saying whatever the data context for this particular thing is. So I'm going to say data context. The data context for this particular window contains an object where we can bind to the properties. So that's the first thing that's very important to remember. The data context of a particular object, user control, whatever, in WPF and Silverlight is the class that has all of the items. So if you were to guess, what do you think the data context for this window is going to be? And if you guess the view model, you would be completely correct, right? So the first thing we need to do is we need to find a way, right, to make the data context of the window equal to the new main window view model. Now, There are several ways to do this. This is the poor man's way of doing it. This is a way of doing it really fast. You can also put it into the XAML. And the way that you do that is I'll show you really quick and then take it out. We need to add a namespace, right? And we're going to call it local. And in the local namespace, we are going to add, let me scroll all the way down. Let me see, WPF reports. Let's see if I can find it. First thing I need to do is I need to compile is what I need to do. So let me do that and let me compile. Very good. Now that it's compiled, I can say XML namespace local, right, equals, and we're going to scroll all the way to the bottom again. And hopefully we can see WPF reports, right? Once we do that, right, what we can do is we can set the window.data context like so. And what we'll do is we'll say that it's actually going to be the local thing, and the local thing is going to be the view model. Now, here's the weird thing. The reason why I showed it to you first this way is because this kind of makes sense, right? If you're coming from WinForms, right? You're setting the data context. Now, I want you to look at these in parallel, just so you can see what it is that XAML is doing. Notice that data context is part of this window, right? So window.data context, and you know how we said equals here? Notice that equals here is used by containment in the XAML. We're saying use a main window view model, right? What it's going to do is it's going to automatically spin that up, right? So do you see this sort of the analogy here? We're used to looking at things through code, but just think of XAML as kind of code, right? Window.data context here, right? Window.data context here equals new main window view model equals local. How does it know what local is, right? It knows that it's the namespace for WPF reports. Local : use main window view model. Did I close that? Yes, I did. All right. So I'm going to take that out and just leave the other one for now, right? Other people also do some interesting things with this because, for example, they're able to inject things into here using IOC containers. The Prism, for example, there's other frameworks like Caliburn, Micro, MVVM Lite, others. You can actually inject stuff into here. And the reason why it's important to have an empty constructor is that when you put it in the XAML, like I did previously, it spins it up, it news it up using an empty constructor. However, if you're using IOC containers, you can inject them in as well. All right, so we've set this up. The binding is set up. Now the next thing we need to do is we need to say, hey, notice that this really doesn't, we don't need this anymore, right? So I can take that out, make sure everything compiles. Looks like we're good. And now, as you recall in the picture here, notice that the view model now is going to have stuff that we need to put in. The first thing that is almost always imperative in the view model is this property change events, right? So let me show you how you set that up in WPF. I'm sorry, in this class. So the very important class that we always set up in view models is this thing called iNotify property event property changed, right? Changed. So it's in component model, and what that allows it to do is it allows it to automatically communicate any changes to properties back and forth. So let me implement it, and let's use the magic of CodeRush. Yes, CodeRush rules. Boom. There we go. We'll save that. We don't want to use these. We can, but I'm going to be simple, and I'm just going to say string property. Right? And what this does is it says, hey, anytime a property changes, we're going to tell whoever's listening to this property change event handler that something's changed. Notice that the handler, though, if you go to it, F12, requires a sender and a property changed event args. The property changed event args really just takes a property name. So we're going to cut through all of this, and we're just going to say handler and we're going to say it is this that is setting it, and we're going to make a new property changed event args and pass in the property, right? Because we don't want to concern ourselves with that, all that other stuff. So now we have this virtual method where we can literally pass in a string property and notify WPF that something has changed. Now, let's go back to let's go back to the XAML and notice that we're binding to a property called preview model, right? So let's go back to the view model. Excuse me. Let's go back to the view model and let's create a property called preview model. Now, the thing is, what was the object type? What was it that we bound previously to the model? Let's go up and look at this code that we saved, right? Notice that the model was actually an extra report preview model. So let's just, for kicks and giggles, use that, right? There you go. If you want to go all the way to the basics of it, notice that you can go to the class itself, and the basest of the base is this thing called an iDocument preview model, right? And so if you wanted to just use this interface instead, you could go iDocument preview model, escape, we're back, and we can do this. And the reason why you might want to do that is maybe the preview model is going to be different. I don't know. But you can that way do any kind of preview model, which gets into the printing system. You might be able to do printing links with it. So let me Control Z that and just leave it like that. Now what we need to do is we need to say preview model equals new preview model. And notice that you can pass in a report. So let's create one. So product report. Let's bring that in. Report equals new product report. Right? We're going to say, hey, we're going to use this report as the model. And notice that the code is starting to look a little bit like this up here, right? We had a report that we created, We set up a preview model. Notice now that we don't need to do this window stuff because it is in the XAML that we have this document preview that we're going to set up. Okay, so the next thing and last thing we need to do is we need to say report.createDocument so that we have something to look at. All right, now one thing that's important also is remember that if ever the preview model changes, we want to notify the XAML. So let's go over here and let's create some backing store, and let's do this. If value does not equal preview model, right? If it's different, then we want to change it, and we want to say that something's changed. Preview model. Okay, see that? So that allows the communication. So say for some reason you have some other something that changes the preview model, this will automatically reflect that, right? And if we use the interface iDocument preview model rather than this concrete one, you can literally start doing some really cool stuff. All right, so it looks like we've got everything set up. Everything looks to be hunky-dory. Let's make sure that the XAML is set up properly. The preview model has been bound. This has the proper data context. The view model has been set up. Looks like it's time to F5 and see what happens. There you go. Notice that instead of having a button, we set up this whole thing to do that. All right. So I want to recap because I think when I did this, I tried to ease us from Windows Forms thinking over to WPF thinking. So I want to recap really quickly. Okay. So let's look at the code that we set up first. I put it up here to remind us. On the click event, remember that we set up a new report. We did the extra preview model. We set up this model that has to do with how to preview things. We set up this document preview window. We created the document and we showed the window, right? Remember that was on the click event. Now that we're using MVVM, we have this intermediate class or this middle class that's handling stuff from the model, and pushing it over to the XAML, right? So the first thing that I want to show you is that we literally dragged on a preview, document preview, right? Here we had a window. Here we have this user control that we've set up, right? What we've done is we've used the fabulous binding system that WPF and Silverlight have to say, hey, you know what? Your model is now this. Notice that that's very similar to saying, hey, look, your window, right, has this model, right? And so you'll see that your preview control has this model. But notice that with the model, we're kind of redirecting, or we're binding over to the preview model. So we'll put that over there. So as soon as I go through this overview, Amanda, I'll take some questions real quick because I want people to understand this. Because I did say reporting with MVVM, but I really want us to learn MVVM because then everything else is about the same. So once you've bound it, notice that we have to say, okay, what is the context of this window, right? And it turns out the context, the data context of this window is the main window view model, right? So when we bind the model to this property preview model, we're binding it to the data context, which happens to be the main window view model, the property in there being the preview model. There you go. All right, and then we set up in the constructor, we set up the report, we set the preview model, as we did over here, right? Notice how we set up the model over here, to be the extra report preview model, and then we created the document. We also implemented iNotify property change so that events can go back and forth between the view model and the view. And then I said, hey, if anything changes the preview model, make sure to notify the other. All right, Amanda, any questions before I move on?
Yes. Is there a way to design your own reports at runtime so that their clients can design their own reports?
In WPF, there is not. We are currently working on that's a really, really good question. We are currently working on XPF, as we like to call it, designer. So we are working on that. However, they can do it in Windows Forms. And notice that what's cool about this is, say you have 10 reports and you want to do a drop-down box in WPF. What you can do literally is you can automatically choose things, like choose a different report, and all you need to do is change the preview model in the view model class, and it will automatically cause the view to change. So that's a really, really good question. So you can design stuff with Windows Forms, but we are still working on an end user report designer. Also, our one of our support guys who always comes, by the way, he's fabulous. He's saying you can look at some of our docs. There's a how to invoke standard extra reports print preview and end user designer in a WPF application. It's an article or a sample. It's sample E2086. Oh, by the way, let me show you. When I give you samples and stuff, let me go over here. Let me go to support.devexpress.com and let me type in there something, a how-to question. So I'm going to go to keywords, how-to, right? Search. There it is. Notice that you can go to the Code Central samples, click it, and there is a little video. So let's go example runner. Notice there's a little video that I made on showing you how to use the example runner. It will totally just set it up for you, and you can look at it. So good question there. And the sample again was E2086. Let's see what else he said. Oh yeah, we have some questions and some suggestions creating a report designer for WPF. We are working on one for Silverlight, I'm pretty sure, and I'm hoping that it will automatically work its way into WPF. Good question. All right, any other questions?
Nope, that's it.
Okay, good.
That's fine.
So we have about 15 minutes. So what I'm going to do is this is we're getting to the crazy part of the demo where I haven't tried this yet. So what we're going to do is we're going to play with parameters and show you how to interact with parameters and WPF. Okay. All right. So now that we're reaching my hopefully the demo people will be friendly to me. So let's go and do that. So okay, we don't need this anymore. Perfect. All right, so what we're going to do now is we're going to add some parameters. And by parameters, I mean we want to be able to use parameters to sort of help us out when we're loading stuff up. All right, so the way you do that is if you look over here, you'll see there's this parameters thing, right? I'm going to go ahead and create a parameter. And the parameter is going to be called category. Thank you. So we're going to call it category. And in the category parameter, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use it to filter out categories, right? Because notice that we have several categories and products that are in that category. So we're going to filter that out. So I'm going to go to the filter string, and I'm going to hit plus, and I'm going to say category name begins with. And notice that you can compare it with another field. You can compare it with there's another field. Or you can compare it with okay. So one is something you type in. One is another actual property inside of the data source, or one is the parameter. So we're going to begin with a parameter here. And notice what happens when I hit preview. Right, I'm going to say everything that starts with a C. And notice that it brings up condiments and confections. Okay. Another thing that's important to note is that there are two things that you need to think about when working with parameters. The first is, do you require the parameter by default? Meaning, do you want the user to force it so that the parameter is required? Right. The way you set that is, let me kill the commands here. Is you go to something called request parameters, right? I've set it to false because I want to see the report and then filter on it afterwards. You can also set this to true. I'm not going to do that in this particular demonstration, but you can set this to true, right? So that's the first thing. Do we want the document before it's created to actually force the user to put parameters in? That is. So notice that when we hit preview, it loads a report because it's not forcing it, right? And then the category, you can put the C in there and hit submit, right? But let me show you what that does. So that way you can see what I'm talking about. So let me go to false. Let me set it to true, and let's do the preview. Notice that the document does not contain any pages because it's asking for the parameters before, right? I'm not going to do that. I want to show the report first. So I'm going to hit false. The second thing that's very important is the visibility of the parameter, right? If the parameter is not visible, right, notice that it's not going to ask for it. Now, the question is set. Why would I do that? Well, what if you don't want to have the parameter UI actually show up in the preview? What if you want to control exactly how those things are passed in? Well, what you would do is you would either say request parameters true or false, meaning are we required to have parameters before the report is shown? And the second thing is you would set the visibility of each parameter that you want to control how things are put in that way. Okay, so those are two things that are very important. I'm going to set the visibility to true, right? And then I'm just going to run. Notice there were no changes at all to the actual WPF app. So when we load this thing up, notice that just like in the preview window, we have the report loading up like we wanted it to. And now we're going to hit C, hit submit, and life is quite good. All right, Amanda, are there any questions about this? I think this concept has confused some. Request parameters has to do with the report itself. The parameters visibility has to do with each parameter's visibility in this UI. Any questions?
Let's see. Well, we have some comments. It would appear that your Seth's discussion on parameters relates to tables and views. You are bringing back all the records and then filtering. I want to
Yes.
let the stored proc filter the query and only return the records found by the stored proc.
That is beautiful. In fact, this question goes right along with the discussion that I was talking about. In this particular case, what you want to do is you want to handle how the parameters are set. So what you would do is you would say request parameters true, meaning we don't want to show the report at all until the parameters are set. And then what you would do is you would set the visibility of the report of each parameter to false, meaning don't show the parameters. Then what you would do is you would have some kind of user interface, right? And in this user interface, you would have where you set the parameters on your own. And then what you do is on the before print event of the actual report is you would pass in those parameters, set them, and then once you get those parameters, you can use those parameters. Let me show you some code here because that's a really good question. And this was Carl's question, by the way. So let's go to the designer, and let's go to the report, and let's go to the before print event, right? Notice that in the before print event, we're not going to do anything here, but you have access to the parameters, right? And you can say parameter, you can look at all the parameters, or you can literally just pick the index of the parameter. Once you pull these parameters out, you can say you have some let's make a method, right? So let's say you have some method to pull data or something. Pull data, and in it you want to pass in the parameter ID, right? So we're gonna make this real quick. We're gonna declare the method here. Very good, and we're gonna call this the ID, not if, the ID, and then we're ID. Good, and then we're gonna put this over here. Why does it keep doing that? Sorry about that. So there's the ID. We're going to line these guys up. I don't know why it's not lining up. So pull data, private void, pull data. Okay, and then we're going to move this over here. And we're going to hit escape. All right, so let's take a look and make sure everything's kosher here. For some reason, it's not liking pull data. Oh, it must have a return type. Why? I don't know why it's asking for a return type, but I guess it doesn't matter. So I'm going to say var x equals. Yeah, that's weird that it's asking for a return type. Return 1. Excuse me. Let's F6 this real quick. I think I'm missing something here. Is there like an extra? There's a product report. There's the ID. I guess I don't see where my problem is. Holy cow. There's the class. There's the namespace. There's the integer. What is going on here? Pull data, private int ID. Oh, I know what's going on. Oh geez. Now I feel weird. Sorry guys. So I'm gonna say void. That's so dumb. I'm like, Amanda, I just did like the seriously most rookie thing in the universe, okay? So there you go. All right. Should be happy. We don't need any return types now. Okay. So let's pretend that this thing returns a data set or sets the data, right? So this says data source equals whatever, right? So in this function, what you want to do is you want to use the parameters, right? So say, let's change this to a string, here, and let's go over here and do string x, string x, right, equals parameters, right? And then we want category dot to string, right? Because it is a string. And now what you can do is on the before print, let's pretend this function is your stored procedure somehow, right? And it actually sets the data source. Now you can pull the parameter out. You can pass it to the pull data function and let it do its thing, right? So I'm going to run this, right? And the first thing I need to do is I need to say if parameters.count is greater than 0 for check and parameters dot category does not equal null, then do this. Right? And you're probably thinking, well, Seth, why do we need to do that? Yes.
Joe's just is clarifying his question. He just wants to make sure he understands while you're still doing this. He needs to create a wrapper class for the stored procedure that returns a data set, and then he binds the data set to your reports.
Yes. Beautiful. Yes. And what was his name again? I'm sorry.
Joe Rich.
Joe. Pretend that this function is the wrapper that pulls the data set. Right? Let's say it returns a data set. And then you say var data equals pull data. And then you would say data source equals whatever this function returns, right? So let me actually step through it. There it is. Notice that the parameter actually has, oh, why is it doing that? I need to stop that. It's not to string here. I think it's value. Dot value. Okay, yeah, okay, that's better. Yeah, I know. I need to stop it. That was wrong. I need the value out of it because I was getting some weird. I was getting the data type information. Oh, good question. Good catch, compiler. Thank you, sir. So F5 here. Let's make sure it doesn't crash. Okay, good. Looks like it's got the value. Notice that there's nothing in there, right? So we might want to put another if statement. If x.length is greater than 0, then pull data, right? So F10, F5. Let's set the category here. Okay, so this example is not quite going to work, remember, because the request parameters is set to false. We need to set it to true, right? Because before the report is even printed, then that's going to happen. Let's see if it actually hits the event here. Yes, it does. Notice that I put the C. Let's hit F10. Notice that the parameter is now C, and you can actually do your pull data function there. Okay? Hopefully that helps. I know Carl had a question just like that, and so hopefully I got to that. All right, any comments or questions about that, Amanda?
Joe says that I got it, so that's good.
Joe, wonderful. Carl, does that work for you too? Because Carl was really nice because Homeboy sent me an email like a couple hours before saying, Seth, I want you to talk about this. And I was like, yes, Carl, I will. If you do send me stuff like that, I'm happy to, because these really are for you, really. Nobody cares what I have to say. What we care about is delivering your products to your clients on time and in a way that makes them, yeah. Oh, Carl and Joe
nice.
work together. Aww. Are you guys like sitting in the same room? Seriously, you guys should like give each other a high five or a hug or something else that's not relatively
They're
weird.
not together. They're not in the same room.
So is there any way we can go to webinar and ask them for like a virtual high five button? I think we need to do that. Okay.
Let's see. You do have another question about how to create a storyboard report.
I wonder what that means. Can you like with pictures?
Something like dynamically changed? Is that?
Oh, okay. So here's okay. Before I get to your question, yeah, Faye, I want to tell you I'm out of time. I've got like 4 minutes left. I'm not going to get to the parameter stuff. I think I did a good sort of treaty on the parameters. What I was going to do is I was going to create like an outside way of actually binding the parameters and then passing them in. I'll let you work on that, and if you have any questions about that, let me know. I'm happy to do that. But notice that, just to recap, I did set up a view model, and notice that the XAML is bound to the preview model. Notice that the main window XAML is pretty much empty, which is, I mean, it could be good or bad, but it depends. I think it's good. So I've gone through and I've talked about parameters a little bit as well. So hopefully that helps. So back to your questions. So let me go to view questions here. Uh-oh, I lost my question window.
It says, can I create a storyboard report, something like dynamically changed?
Wonderful. So here is my particular feeling on that, Yafe. When it comes to reports, my general philosophy, and this might not agree with yours, and that's okay. My general philosophy is that if you're going to do a report, reports eventually are going to go on a paper, on a piece of paper. That's my feeling. So if there's something on a report that doesn't quite fit the, hey, is this going to work on a piece of paper? I tend to be semi-leery about using a report. So, for example, say you want to drill down report, right? Why don't you just use our grid, right? Because our grids are very powerful. Not only will they be able to drill down into like sub-items or look at stuff with our grids, but you'll also be able to sort, group, and do every other thing. And you're saying, yeah, but Seth, they want to export it to PDF. Yeah, that's where you use the printing system and printing links to print out those particular things. So, EFA, if you want to create a storyboard that's on a piece of paper that you're going to print out and show, then yeah, you could probably do that. One of the things that you can do is there is an image control on reports that you can drag on to the report, and that image can be generated dynamically. There's a demo that I did that generates a map of the United States and binds different areas with different colors based upon population in the census. So yeah, you can do that. So hopefully I've answered your question, Yafe. You can, but I would probably use something else if you wanted to be super interactive, because the end goal of a report, in my opinion, is that it's going to be on a piece of paper. All right, let's see what my back channel is telling me.
They're telling us, well, they told me to tell Yafe that to post a sample of the report he needs to our support center, and that they'll do their best to help create the report that he needs.
I'll tell you, our dudes are seriously amazing support. Like, you know how I have, like, for example, today I found some bug in something that we were working on. I don't email people. I literally send a support request, just like every one of our clients, because the thing is tracked. They're very good about it. I sent a bug report a while back on something that was just silly, some weird thing that happened. Literally fixed it in a day. Sent me a patch. So I don't know. Maybe I should like change my name to like anonymous user and then submit support requests. Maybe they like me or something. But I have literally loved support even before I was an evangelist for DevExpress. All right. Yafe, you want to look at my map project? Shoot me an email. I'll send it to you. We could totally play with it. Okay. Any other questions, Amanda, or comments, complaints? We are right at 1 hour. Look at that.
Yeah,
let's get a round of applause for staying on time. I like it. So, okay, good. Any other questions or comments?
Let's see. Carl says you don't need to change your name. DevEx support is that good.
Carl, I have my hands outstretched. Bring it in. It's hug time. Bring it in, brother.
You're such a hugger.
Thank you. You know what I'm saying? Any other questions or comments?
Nope, we've covered. We've got to everybody, I think.
Wonderful. Yep. Well, let me just tell you, my next webinar is going to be an Axe. I'm going New Yorker now. You got Axe DevExpress, whatever you want. I think it's sometime next week. My next appearances will be at the LA Silverlight Users Group on April 26th at 7 p.m. Love to see you there. I'm talking about machine learning. Then I'm going to be at TechEd. TechEd is May 16th through the 19th. Come say hi.
As will I. I'll be there too.
Yeah. Hopefully you won't stay up as late.
Yes.
We won't have to carry you out of the party again. I mean, that was a mess.
I wish someone had carried me out. My feet hurt so bad.
And then after that, I'm going to be at Code Stock June 2nd and 3rd, I believe, in where is it? It's in Knoxville, Tennessee. So I'm really excited to go there. I'm thinking of submitting to DevLink. I'm not sure. So that's where we're at, everybody. All right, Amanda, awesome. I turn it back to you.
Awesome. Thanks, Seth. So yeah, Seth's next webinar is an Ask the DevExpress reporting team. It is April 25th. So it's April 25th at 10 a.m. All right. So next week, we have a Day of Design webinar coming up on Tuesday, April 19th. It is an all-day event, literally. It's like about an 8-hour webinar where you'll be able to peek over our shoulder and see how we go about creating a WinForm skin from scratch. And we are recording it because we understand that not everyone can spend 8 hours on a webinar, and it will be made available for viewing. Also, we have an introduction to the pivot grid for WPF next Wednesday, April 20th, with analytics evangelist Woody Pewitt. Woody will walk through how to use the DX Pivot Grid control and show common scenarios with it. So again, if you missed anything from this webinar or you would like to download it later for viewing, visit us at the DevExpress channel at tv.devexpress.com. And to register for webinars, visit us at devexpress.com/webinars. All right, so again, thank you to Seth and to our dev guys behind the scenes. Thank you all for joining us, and thanks for choosing DevExpress.